is John Rare. If you have less than an hour to listen to a great story that I'm about to tell, Cadillac Kid and I had similar pasts, similar stories. We were both in love with pro wrestling. We both started off in the backyard. And we were both undersized, underutilized, and no one expected much out of us. But everybody knows what I did. But here today, you're going to get to listen to a story about a kid named Cadillac Kid and what he did. Maybe you don't know. Maybe you do know. But here is a little bit of his story.
I met John when I was 13 years old. And it was interesting because we wanted to do backyard wrestling. And we never really had a way to record it or had the initiative to do it. But then my brother, Mike, met John Rare. And it was interesting because the day they met, it was like two heads bumped together and magic happened. But we came up with a show called Mother's Day Massacre. And it was the very first TWF BWA show. And I had a match with, if I'm not mistaken, my brother. And we did alright. Of course, we're not trained, so we didn't know what the hell we were doing.
His arch enemy, MYK. 6'205", and the current TWF World Champion.
And then I watched John and Goose wrestle. And that was an interesting match because we went from the backyard, this little trampoline, all the way around the backyard into the front yard. This was hilarious. And we watched this, and we're watching two guys beat the hell out of each other. And I had just met this guy, John. And he seemed like the nicest guy I'd ever met. He was always playing around, just playful. And he didn't really have a care in the world to a certain degree. And then fast forward a couple of weeks, and we started doing backyard wrestling shows at his house because my mom wouldn't allow it.
Oh my Lord! People! I don't know! This is too extreme for us! Oh my gosh, they're both down! And Switchblade's gonna come and try to take advantage of this situation! Telling John Rare to get his ass up. You know, Switchblade likes to do a lot of those little wookie drop kickers, I've noticed.
Destroy the backyard. And we started doing backyard shows every weekend, either Saturday or Sunday, it depends on the week. And we made stories out of it to the point you could follow it like a regular wrestling show. But throughout that time, I got to know all of these people. Like, we formed a brotherhood. And John was at the top of that. Like, everybody wasn't underneath him, but we were all equal. He was just the one you go to when you had a question. And he was always willing to answer those questions. He was always willing to help what you could work on. Even though none of us really knew what we were doing, it was still good to have somebody that might have that knowledge. And so several times throughout the I think it was 7 years that we wrestled, we would have a show, storyline, whatever, and then me and John would end up in a match somehow. I wouldn't know about it until that day. It's like, oh, well, hey, me and you were going to wrestle. Okay, cool. I never had a problem wrestling with John because he was always willing to do almost anything. I remember, let's see, he was the one that threw me into the barbed wire pit. That was interesting. And that was more or less, he kind of hyped me up to do that. He before the match and everything, we got to talking about it, and he's like, don't worry about it, it's going to be fine, you'll be alright, just kind of go with it. And lo and behold, I landed the barbed wire pit, and I was fine. I had not a scratch on me. And it was weird for me, being 14 at the time, and these are grown men, you know, beating the hell out of me every weekend. But I always felt like I had a camaraderie and friendship with all of them. Mostly with John, because of the fact that he was more willing to work with you, not against you. He wasn't trying to put himself on top of the mountain, because I mean it was the backyard. We had no mountain. But he did show a bit of an ego to a certain extent, but it was more or less playful. He wasn't egotistical like everybody thinks. He wasn't an asshole. He never was. There were a few times where he might deflect something that you might have asked him, but it wasn't like, no, we're not going to do that. It was more like, maybe if we did this instead, you know, something like that. And for 7 years we did that. We formed a brotherhood of backyard wrestlers, and most of us have remained friends since then. I'm still friends with a lot of them. There may be a few that we kind of cast out for various reasons. But John is probably one of my closest friends because of helping me get through all of these matches.
When I first met the Norris brothers, Mike and Jay, you know, actually Jason, but I've always called him Jay or Cadillac Kid, you know. I've hardly ever had to call this guy Jason, but you know, between him and his brother, there's always been that friendly competition between those two. And you know, I would say Cadillac's will to do a little bit more when it comes to the wrestling business with hardcore, even doing a little bit of death matches and then just regular matches, he displayed a little bit more credibility when it come to his career that way. And you know, in the backyard, he was a little bit more whiny. He definitely put off that childish feel that, you know, he had, but when you look at it, he was a kid when we were doing
This
that.
is my tooth. Hey, yeah. See, I got one missing. All because John's ankle. It hurt. He landed right on my face.
But you are still the BWA champion.
Oh, yeah. Look at this. Look. See? Look at that.
Toothless people, they sure are legal.
Hey, saves me a trip to the dentist. Wait, crap. Now I got to go again. Dang it. Oh, well. Saves me a trip to the dentist, pain, and whatever else. Let's see. Oh, and I kept my title. I had 3 matches today. And, ow.
So, we go from the backyard to when I got notified that John had bought a ring. Like a true professional wrestling ring. Now, at 16, this is monumental for me because all the way up to 13, 14 years old, I had a dream of becoming a professional wrestler and training to be one. And so when I heard a friend of mine had a ring, it's like instant, I gotta get in it. So I think it was the week after it was bought, we go out there to start training. We set up the ring and everything. And what was funny as hell that day was that we had the ring set up, but no mat, no padding, nothing. Sheena calls me into the ring. So I get up there. She asked me, have you ever taken a bump? I said, no, never. I'm 16 years old, never taken a bump. She picks me up for a fireman's hold, and then just flips me over and drops me onto the wood. Hardest bump I have ever taken, ever. That thing sucked. I mean, that was the very first one out of many that were to occur over the next, I wouldn't even say 10 years, but so we start training, we get the ring fully set up, and what really kind of pokes out to me is the interesting story of my brother and I. My brother's more the traditional wrestler. He wants to do all the moves and everything, but he's not interested in bringing in chairs, barbed wire, tables. He doesn't like that stuff. Me, let's fucking do it. So, while we're training, Jeremy Snyder, he's about 6'3", if I'm not mistaken. I'm only 5'11", and we're training to do a back body drop. That was... So, I go for the back body drop, and I'm going 8 feet in the air onto the little padding about that much. I've got that much padding, that much wood. I get the wind knocked out of me for a few seconds, but then I hop back up. And my brother, it was my brother's turn to go. And he's a good almost 300 pounds, about a 6 foot tall. And it's his turn to take a back body drop. And he elects not to do it. Everybody's looking at him. Why not? It's your turn. You gotta learn to do this, man. He's, no. Me? I want to do that again. And everybody looked at him and goes, your little brother, who just took this, smaller than you, is willing to do it again, and you're not even willing to do it once. Like, everybody busted out laughing at that point. We got trained by Jeremy Snyder, the Blur, and a few, John would kind of throw in a few things that he might know, because he had been trained before. There was a few instances where people would come out to train, and then we would have them take a few bumps, and then they'd quit instantly, because training's kind of hard to do when you're having to take so many bumps and all that. But throughout all this, that camaraderie and friendship is really showing, because we're each trying to help each other. It wasn't just, oh, come out here and do this. Do this 6 times in a row. Okay, I see what you're doing wrong. That's what it was. There was several instances of, somebody would be in the ring and trying to work on something, and then everybody would just crowd around the ring trying to help them. And if I'm not mistaken, John would actually be the first one in the ring to try and help. I remember he tried to help me with a front flip out of an armbar. That was fun, because he would just hold my arm and I would front flip out of it because I was trying to work on something, and he would be the first one to help. He almost always was. But training was so much fun for me, because I'm getting to live the dream that I had as a kid. Like, I'm actually in a professional wrestling ring, and I'm learning to do what I love to watch. So, reminiscing is just so much fun. So we get done training, and I'm only 17 years old. And my first show was in line vault. The idea was it was supposed to be me and my brother. That's how it happened. The idea behind it was I'm a street thug, but I'm a good guy. You know, I'm not one of those. Yeah. And my brother was supposed to be Officer Norris. Officer Norris. Stupid skin paper. But it made sense. We get to the show, at the venue, we get the ring set up, and we get through the show, and this comes up to me and Mike. And of course, he comes out, I come out, and we get mostly through the match pretty well. It was one of those, like, really cringy when you go back and watch it. But a few things kind of pop out for me was, one, the ref wasn't supposed to see us use the nightstick. He saw it blatantly. Like, you can see in the video, he's got his head like this, and then he turns around and is like, oh no, not time yet, no. Like, really? Can you not do a better job? The Russian leg sweep was another spot that kind of threw me for a loop, because, now, picture this. I'm green as hell, first match ever, and it's for both of us. It's our very first match. And he goes for a Russian leg sweep, and my head hits the mat. Hard enough for me to see the entire planet upside down. That was probably a scary moment for me, because I'm still new to this, and I just essentially got a concussion. I didn't know what to think. But for a split second, I saw everything upside down, and then right back to where it was. We went on with the match. But just the kind of person I was. Don't know why. That was stupid. And then we get through that match, and it was, like I said, cringy now that you look at it, but for me, I was ecstatic. I had just wrestled in my first show. So then I get the news a little while later, I think it was about a couple of months later, that John is going to be trying to do weekly shows at a place called Dry Riders. And I was all for it, you know, trying to do weekly shows, trying to keep storylines, because storylines are what really matter in professional wrestling, because if you don't have one, it's kind of pointless. Which is why certain mainstream shows are boring now. But, so we get to Dry Riders, and the very first show we did, I wrestled Nasty Nate, rest in peace, and Vega, who was John Rare under a mask. And we had a funny spot that started that match, because the Nasty Nate match, I'll leave it at that. It was a good match from what I remember. I don't remember much of it, just because it was so long ago. But the match with Vega was supposed to be like a familial revenge, because the idea was John under the mask was going to threaten my mother, who was in the audience that night. And I enjoyed it because it got my mom involved, and she had never really been involved with something like that. So while she was out in the crowd, she was, you know, during the first match, that's my son. So that way, when it came time for John, everybody knew that was my mother. And me and him just had a classic one-on-one. It was, I don't remember if it was a hardcore match or not. I think it was. And if it was, one of the more infamous spots for me was a plastic chair. I don't remember if it was that match or another match, but he hit me with a plastic chair instead of a steel one. And it hurt worse than a steel chair does. The reason why is because the plastic reverberates like this, and it just bounces on your skull for 3 seconds. Oh, God. Another, I think, during this match was when I almost died. I legitimately almost died. I went for what's called a head scissors takedown. And in the middle of this move, I'm supposed to tuck my head, and so that way John can do a front flip. And I did not tuck my head properly. I felt the mat tugging at my head. John actually, in that split second, felt me slowing down and lifted up. That's where he saved my life. And I was able to tuck and continue on. And I could never thank him enough for that one. Because had he not done it, I would be severely injured, possibly dead, and I wouldn't have wrestled many more matches. Fast forward to I think the third show. I want to say it was the third show. I may be wrong. We had a battle royal. I think we had a battle royal at every show. Actually, take it back. I'm gonna go back to the second show. We had a battle royal, and in the middle of the ring, we're all, wrestling, and Phil Payne gets on top of me on the second rope, and he starts punching me. He's doing the 1, 2, 3, whatever. And in the middle of this, I look up and I see him turn his face this way, and he is legitimately punching me. And I'm sitting there taking it like, you asshole. Why you gotta do me like this? That was just an interesting spot. And then in the middle of that match, towards the end, the bottom just dropped. It started pouring rain. I've never seen anybody scatter that quick. Never. Not even cockroaches in the light. Jumped out and we had to break down the ring. The fastest thing I've ever seen was the breakdown of the ring that night. We broke that thing down in about 5 minutes. And that show ended on a kind of a sour note. Then we get to the third show, and we get to the Battle Royal, and that's when I'm informed that I'm winning the Battle Royal. Because up to this point, almost every single show, I've had all the kids in the crowd behind me. And I can't think of any other reason for me to win that Battle Royal. But the idea was, Mac Daddy Matt would throw me over the top rope. I would catch myself, fall on the apron. And he would get up on the top rope and then drop down over the top rope and celebrate on the apron. I would roll back in, bounce off the ropes, and drop kick him off. And it went off without a hitch. That's how it ended. He threw me over the top rope, I landed on the apron. He gets up on the top rope, drops down, and then I run and drop kick him off. And the whole crowd went nuts for that one. All the kids jumped in the ring. They were all trying to help pick me up. And I'm just laying there. It's like, this is awesome. Hearing my name being called. The next show I did was out in Bowden, Georgia. I don't remember the name of the show, even though it was just told to me a few minutes ago. Still don't remember it. I was not supposed to be in this show. See, you have to be 18 to be in a ring and wrestle on a show. I was not. I was 17. And it was a show that, had they found out, no. We would have gotten a lot of trouble.
So someone didn't show up for Peach State Wrestling, which was booked through Action Mike Jackson. So Jackson asked me, did I have anyone extra there that he could use to take on legendary Chick Donovan? And I was like, I've got a guy in the crowd who's done some wrestling. It was Cadillac Kid. Of course, he was experienced at backyard wrestling, not real wrestling, but Action Mike Jackson put him in the ring. And hey, one of his biggest opportunities came because somebody else just didn't show up. And I really wanted to wrestle him that night. But I had the Ultimate Dragon, and I just so happened to have the spare outfit of Vega. So
wrestling under a mask. I was wrestling under the name of Night Stalker. And I was wrestling someone that I shouldn't have been wrestling, personally. But I'm glad I got the experience. And that was Chick Donovan. Somebody who stepped in the ring with Ric Flair. That's really the only name that comes to mind, honestly. I get there and I'm talking to him and he just said, we're just going to go wrestle, wrestle, wrestle. Okay. I'm still new. I'm trying to figure this out. But okay. We get to the ring, and James Johnson is our ref. He's a good friend of mine. Chick comes out. He's doing his whole thing. I'm in the ring, and at one point, Chick gets in the ring, and I'm supposed to powder out and let him have the spotlight. I'm not in that frame of mind yet. So James actually has to tell me, hey, get out of the ring. So Chick comes running at me, and I jump out of the ring as quickly as I can. But that match was just more fun for me. I hope that Chick Donovan didn't get mad at me at any point because of me being new. I enjoyed that match just for the experience. The chops I took were, they left a bruise for a good week. But that match was just fun. That's all it was for me. It was just fun. I love the fact that I wasn't supposed to be in that match at all. And that's why I had to wear a mask. So people don't know it's me. The next match I did, my matches get kind of intertwined as to where they happened in my life. But I remember Next Era, Robbie. And probably my most famous match was with John. Because that match went off, I wouldn't say without a hitch, but we had so many things planned. It was supposed to be a hardcore match. I was new guy, and I was challenging John for his hardcore title that he had won the previous week. And I come out, and I tell the ref, I want my shot. I want to take his title from him, and blah, blah, blah. So we start going through the match. And we had found a pane of glass in the back. It was about yay big. Wasn't very big at all. But we wanted to use it. And I told John, I said, hey, I want to break this over your head. He's like, cool, let's do it. You know, that's just the way John was. And so we brought the pane of glass out, and there was a few other things that we had planned, and I'll get to those in just a second. But that was the number one thing for me, because we set it down in the bottom corner, and it was supposed to break over his head, so I Irish whipped him into it. Nothing, just bounced off and fell on the ground. And then I tried to DDT him into it. Nothing. And so while I'm sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do to break this pane of glass over his head? I get an idea, don't remember what it was, but I go to stand up and turn around, and as soon as I turn around, pane of glass over my head, and I've got the frame around my neck. And as I'm falling backwards, all I can think of is, fuck you, John, you're an asshole. That's all I could think. Because to me, that was supposed to break over his head, not mine. We get through it a little bit, and then our referee, who's also James Johnson, we wanted to get him in on the action. So we had an idea where John and James would get into an argument over like a pin count or whatever. And then I would drop on all fours behind John, James would push him, and it just made the crowd laugh. It was pretty hilarious. We had another spot planned that kind of got ruined by the owner of the building. The idea was we would go out to the ring, or go out of the ring, and go up to the bleachers that were still floated up against the wall, and I would jump off, and John would hit me with a light tube. So we start fighting outside the ring, and we head towards the bleachers, and I knock John down. I get up on the bleachers and look down, and he's, I don't know, couldn't find it. And I just, okay, double axe handle, and he punches me in the stomach. That was the quick thinking that we had. You know, I trusted him. Of course, he broke my trust a few seconds later, where I told him before this I did not want to do anything to take a bump outside of the ring, and he snap-mared me on the outside of the ring. Oh boy, I hated him since then. But that's just fun, really, because the more I thought about it, it's like, oh well, it happened. I'm alive. We actually got in trouble for that match because of the glass that we had used, and me being kind of naive, I apologized, but now that I think on it, I shouldn't have apologized. I should have just asked him, was your family entertained? Because that crowd went nuts multiple times, and we put on a good show. We did our best with what we had. And then Birmingham Hardcore Wrestling comes around. And I'm in love with this idea of weekly shows. I know it takes a lot because, you know, money and making sure talent is there, but I'm all for it. So when I get contacted about doing a match with anybody in a Birmingham hardcore wrestling show, I'm all for it. So I jump at the chance. And I find out a little while later that I'm wrestling a guy by the name of J Impact.
Got him up in a torture rack style maneuver. Oh, rack bomb! Oh, rack bomb! Throws him down. 2.
And if I'm not mistaken, I had met him before at Robbie's show, and he seemed kind of egotistical. A little bit, you know, he'd been doing it for a little while, but he just had that egotistical way about him. And so we get to Birmingham Hardcore Wrestling, and I'm talking with Jay outside, or before the show, and I'm like, you know what, just hit me. Grab a chair and hit me with it. Grab this or hit me with it. Just full on hit me with it. And I found out during that little talk, he said, well, if you grab something, don't hit me too hard with it. And that was when I kind of lost a little bit of respect for him, but then he told me why, and it's like, okay, I can kind of understand that. Now that I look back on it, I respected his wish. I didn't hit him very hard with anything. I think I may have hit him kind of hard with a cookie sheet, but those are pretty flimsy, so they don't hurt as much. But now I see him doing deathmatch, and I'm like, you motherfucker.
Trying to get to his feet now. Impact better watch his back. And off the top! Impact got caught. 1, 2, no!
I'm gonna hit you 10 times harder. Alright, whatever. This was the match that was supposed to be my last match. It wasn't planned going into it that it was going to be my last match. It was actually, after the match was over, I realized something very quickly, and that was that I could have been paralyzed. More on that in just a second. So we get to the match, and we kind of play around with the fans bring the weapons idea of some of the things that were brought. An ironing board was brought. Don't know who brought that. No clue. But it was kind of funny. So we get out there and we start doing our thing. And see, we had a few spots planned that we pulled off without a hitch. Others were kind of hit or miss. I kind of lost track of everything after getting hit in the face. Really, it was by accident. It wasn't anybody's fault. It was really mine, really. But he did a gory special into a go to sleep, and my face full on hit his knee. And everybody thinks that that's where my tooth got knocked out. No, John knocked my tooth out by accident in a backyard wrestling match. Purely accident. It was more kind of mistimed, but he did that. All Jay did was bust open the inside of this lip, and so I start bleeding, and I fall back, and I of course hear Jay Impact. He lands on me to go for a pin, and he's like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, and I just like, shut the hell up, kick out. And I'm sitting here bleeding out of my mouth. You can even hear in the video or in the DVD that the commentator's like, he's bleeding out of the mouth, he might have internal injuries. That kind of played into my character of never quitting. So we get through a couple of more spots, and then we had an idea where Jay would hit me, knock me down, and I would get back up slowly, and then he would climb up on the second rope and go to jump off towards me, and I would super kick him. And we pulled that off, and it was like the crowd went nuts because I just cut him off. In the middle of the match, I don't know how I pulled it off because I was out of it at that point. I'd been hit in the head too many times. I was still kind of woozy from everything. But I remember it like seeing him out of the corner of my eye, and I'm just standing there like this, and then boom. He hits the ground, I go for a pin, and in my mind I'm going, that was awesome. Then I look back on it on the DVD, and it doesn't look nearly as awesome as I thought it did. Then at one point, I pick up a baseball bat. Or was it a baseball bat? No, he picked up the baseball bat. He hits me with it, and blah, blah, blah. And then I pick up the Jerry's Rake of Death. It was a toy rake with razors taped to the end of it, and that's where my injury came into play. I picked that up, the crowd went nuts for a second, and then he hits me with the baseball bat, takes the razor rake, starts hitting me with it on the back and on the front and whatnot. And then he goes for something. Sorry, memory's not there for it. And we get to the end of that match where I'm supposed to pass out. And I remember an incident in this little spot where he grabs my leg and he pulls it, and he's pulling it a little too hard. You can't hear it in the DVD, but me and him can tell you. I was yelling at him to let loose. And you can actually see where he lets loose. He lifts himself up a little bit. I'm like, okay, so that kind of takes away the egotistical idea that I had of him, because I went back and watched it and saw that, and I'm just like, so he actually did hear me. Cool. After that match, I go to the back, and I'm sitting here, bloody lip, busted elbows, bleeding everywhere. And I go outside. I had told somebody to go get the friend that I was there with. My friend comes out, and I turn around because I felt liquid on my back, and she tells me that I need stitches. And I immediately walk inside after I'd already been checked out by the EMT with my lip, but I found out another cut had been made, so I go to the EMT again. He looks at it and says, you can either go to the hospital and get stitches, or you can let me super glue it. Biggest mistake in my life. Medical super glue is nothing to play with. Shit burns. It's like hot lava. I nearly broke my friend's hand because of it. And that was when I decided, because of where that cut was, how deep it was, how close I was to being paralyzed, I had to stop. At that point, I'd been dealing with back pain for a few years, and so I decided at that moment, I've got to stop. I've got to retire. I hated it because I have such a passion for wrestling. And everybody saw it. Everybody saw it. I loved it. I always wanted to do it. And it was kind of a downer. But then, a few months later, after I made the announcement that I was going to retire, I go to a Tragic City funeral. And I was mostly there as part of the crowd. I'd already paid for my tickets because I support my local friends. And I go to the show, and I find out that one of the other talent is not going to be there. I get asked if I want to wrestle, and I said, I don't, but I know the people that are wrestling, so okay. About 30 minutes before bell time, I get informed that I'm not going to be in that match. I'm going to be in the Battle Royal. And lo and behold, a Tojo Yamamoto Jr. is going to be in this Battle Royal. Among a few other names, Christian Cross, what was his name, Kayla's Breed. And that's just a few that I remember. So we go out to the Battle Royal, and me and Christian Cross had a spot planned. We wanted to plan it with everybody, to where I would get up on the top rope and jump off and do something. I didn't know what, but, and land on everybody for a second. That never happened. And that was fine, really. But they kept me in the corner, Christian Cross and Kayla's Breed. They kept kicking me in the corner, and this is where a funny story between me and Christian Cross comes up. He wasn't paying attention at one point and kicks me right here in the throat. It wasn't hard, but it was enough to notice. And I told them, previously, don't make me take a bump, none of that. So they didn't. But that kicked me right here in the throat. I will never let him live that down. It was an accident. Accidents happen in the ring. They always will. But every time I message him, you kicked me in the throat, you asshole. And then I kind of trade blows with Tojo for a second. Very light worker. Very light. And I love that about him because I had never worked with him before. But he punches me a few times, and he's supposed to toss me out, so he tosses me out. Now, on the video, it looks like I hit my back on the apron. And it aggravated the injury. It did not. I actually missed the apron completely, but we went with it. That was my official last match. Because of that optical illusion as if I hit my back on the way out. So we used it to our advantage and basically said that I had to be rushed to the hospital later that night, and I was told I couldn't wrestle anymore. I had made the decision in the previous match that I shouldn't be wrestling, and that was more or less the kicker for it. It's like, I need to stop. Before it gets out of hand and I get hospitalized, I need to stop. And that was my last match. That was almost 9 years ago today. Or not today, but 9 years ago. I still remain close with all of the people that I met. You know, John, Talon, even Christian Cross, oddly enough. Shady Jane, Kayla's Breed, let's see, and a few others. Some of them I met through like Birmingham Hardcore Wrestling. I remained friends with for a little while, and then we just kind of lost track of each other. But through all of this, through 7, 8, 9 years of wrestling, I have had some of the closest friends I've ever had. And I miss it every day. Because I had so much fun. And I've thought about coming out of retirement, but it's better if I don't.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed this story of Cadillac Kid. It was a simple story of a kid who had a dream. He lived it. He enjoyed it. That's basically everybody's dream when they want to be a wrestler. So don't ever let anybody say that you can't do it. Don't ever let anybody say that you're too small to do it. Don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't live your dream. I lived my dream. Jason Norris, Switchblade, Cadillac Kid, lived his dream. So, once again, thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this. And remember, this was just a story of a kid. Tell you one thing, getting kicked by Cadillac's K-kick sometimes sucks ass. Wow, I almost ran into a very big fucking spider.